Hi, I'm Pandora Maclean-Hoover, and this is another episode of Soul Sister US. The website is soulsisterus.com. Please look us up. If I make references in the podcast to the website, it's so you can go there to look up any links that I may reference, and I often do that. So the background changed since the little introductory podcast to this. I thought this would be a good time to introduce myself a little more as a psychotherapist who's been in private practice for 20 years. I chose this background because it represents an area for thought. The name Think-diff Institute, which is my company's name, came out of a basic piece of the work, which is helping people to think differently about the same old stuff, knowing that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting a different outcome. It's the same with thinking and knowing what you want, which is what we talked about in the first podcast. What do I want? What do you want? So I thought it would be great to have this background and introduce you a little bit to what I do. It's often the case that I call up stories. One that comes to mind is someone saying, well, how do you sit and listen to people bitch and moan all day? At which point I said, well, is that what you think I do? That's not what I do. I invite people to feel like they matter at Think-diff, and that I'm just part of a team of people when the job's too big for one person and they need a little coaching or a little support around understanding why they do what they do and why they think what they think. So years ago, I had to get a new laptop, and I went to a store and I took about 2 hours to pick one out, and I thought, okay, I'm finished. This has been quite an interesting process, but now I have the laptop. And I was paying for it, and the guy said, you're not done yet. And I said, well, what do you mean I'm not done yet? And he said, well, you have to go to that other department and pick out software. And I looked very confused because I took 2 hours to pick out this laptop. And I said, well, why do I have to do that? He said, well, you have to go get software so you can tell it what you want it to do. And I think I may have mentioned I thought it already knew what I wanted it to do, at which point he looked like pretty frustrated. But it was the truth. I hadn't really thought about how a computer worked. It ended up being a terrific metaphor for people. We get programmed, but we get programmed really early on when we really have no choice, no voice, and no mobility. So that's something I often say at the very beginning when I work with clients: no choice, no voice, no mobility. So that leaves the question, who's picking out the software? Who's going to that other department and making choices for programming this little mind, this little baby, into doing what they want it to do? I think it's really important for people to keep in mind that they did not program themselves. There's another saying I have, that parents raise their children in their own image to fit into a world the way they see it. And when I first came across that, I really stopped in my tracks and I thought, wait a minute, parents raise their children in their own image to fit into a world the way they see it. I guess it's an attempt at humor to say it's kind of a crapshoot, really. Hopefully those of you who are watching had terrific parents, and it's conjured up lots of fond memories of, wow, I know I do this like my mom did, or I think this way like my dad did, or it could be another person that was a primary caretaker. But the primary caretaker's role is to help us co-regulate, learn how to do a lot of things. And one of them is manage our feelings and our emotions. So they're pretty raw in a baby, for any of you who remember being one, or have had children, or now are in the grandparent role. I hope I have a broad spectrum of viewers for Soul Sister. But it really gets to those core pieces of belief and wiring. And when it's done well, we probably have a very positive thought about ourselves. And they're called cognitions or beliefs, I statements like I'm good enough, I'm smart, I'm lovable, I can succeed. There's a litany of really cool software. If we had our choice and we went into that software department for the purposes of picking out what we wanted to have as programming, we'd likely pick out the titles that go like that. We probably wouldn't voluntarily pick out I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I can't succeed, I'm not lovable. That's a tough one. If you really grow up with a core belief or a software program that says I'm not lovable, it impacts you at that core level, that level of soul, because you carry it around, and it also informs how you see yourself in the world. The eyes are basically, and the ears are basically lenses through which we hear and see information, and then it gets processed by the software. So that's where we learn that not everybody thinks the same way, and there are differing perspectives on the same subject, including us. And it gets really important to have a strong sense of who you are. I recently took a course where the good news was not only are genetics not necessarily a predictor of destiny, but your core wiring or that early software isn't either. However, in order to change it, you really have to know you have it in the first place. So part of what I hope to do in having chats with many people on Soul Sister US is to explore people's innermost thoughts on different subjects. This morning, for example, I took a beautiful picture outside the window at my home in Maine, and in it was one of our really adorable cats was on a blanket and enjoying just the richness of the fabric, as well as the exploration of the folds. And I remembered a quote from the architect Frank Gehry. He does a fabulous masterclass. I watched the trailer, and I intend to take his class. But in watching the trailer, there were just numerous examples of his software. Movement is a big thing for him. That, of course, is motivated by curiosity. How do things move? He then referenced the fold, F-O-L-D, as one of our earliest accesses to love and warmth, which made me think about a blanket, but it also made me think about complexity and curiosity to see the outer portions of a curve or the inside of a curve. And I happen to love fabric and working with fabric. I am really not a seamstress on any level. My Nana gave me a sewing machine, a 1951 Singer. I think it's called a Featherweight. It's got electricity, and it's got a pedal on the floor. It's certainly had some repair work done on it over the years, and she was masterful on it. But I like to take out the sewing machine and take scraps of fabric where the texture, the color, the pattern, even the size of the scrap will just be something that motivates me to either combine pieces in a certain way to make a design. There's really no need to look too closely at the stitching because I know what you'll see. I'm not a perfectionist that way, and that's a whole other episode really to talk about perfectionism or unrelenting standards and where those come from. Hey, I forgot to mention, if you like these podcasts, and I hope you do, there's a little subscribe button on YouTube on the bottom right, And if you press subscribe and you become a subscriber, it doesn't cost you anything, but it will give me great incentive to keep doing this, and to try more and different ideas for each podcast, inviting guests to also share their thoughts. I've put a few feelers out to a couple of people about sharing their thoughts about the fold, because these people in particular struck me as creatives and people who might bring another layer, if you will, to their interpretation of that. So on that note, I think we'll call it a day. This will be an invitation to contact me at Pandora@think-diff.com, or on soulsisterus.com. I hope you reach out. I'd love your ideas and your feedback. The first podcast, it was amazing. I must thank each and every one of you who took the time to write, do more than a like, and write really beautiful responses, and let me know what you liked, or that certain words resonated with you. I'm not known for brevity, so I can go on, and sometimes I don't know what sticks and what doesn't stick. A nice maybe conclusion, but not a goodbye, to this podcast is to just mention two dear friends who have passed away in May, on May 3rd and May 13th, and both insightful, brilliant people in their own right. Dick and Jill, my friend Jill, and I'm thinking of a quote. Actually, they both had really good quotes. Dick was known for he traded on the stock exchange, and he was known for using a metaphor for life when something's a bad trade. And it was so simple. It's a bad trade, meaning you can let go and move and on and just look to make more trades, which again, for perfectionism, sometimes that's really hard to let go, or guilt, or just other messages from our software that says, you have to hang in there no matter what. Well, that saying was pretty helpful at different times in my life. And then Jill was brilliant, and equally wonderful. And one of her sayings was, when you're really in a tough situation, it's important to visualize that there's an end point. You may not have the date. It's kind of like what we're going through with this COVID crisis. Many of us are feeling the effects of how long it's gone on, and that we've been disconnected from a lot of what's familiar and our routines. So her wisdom in saying, visualize an end point, because there is one. And the more you visualize that, the more you will maintain a buoyancy and an optimism for that ending, and that leads to a beginning. So on that note, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those who were looking for this second episode, and I hope it means something to you. And please let me hear from you. Okay, until the next time, soulsisterus.com. See you soon. Thanks so much.